So welcome, everyone. I am excited to see you all here. This is how do I write a personal statement? My name is Joan Marceau. For those who haven't met me before, I'm the undergraduate internship and career coordinator here at Rockefeller College, and I'm excited that you joined us for our workshop today. We're going to talk a lot about personal statements. You might be writing a personal statement for an internship application. I know some of you are doing that for the Senate and Assembly applications right now. And you may be, whoops, sorry. What I wanted to do, there we go. Let me pull that up. All right, there we go. So you might be writing personal statements for an internship application like the Senate or the Assembly. You may be planning to apply to graduate school or law school or a scholarship. There's a number of different reasons people write personal statements. So what I thought we'd do is kind of just start with some introduction since we've got a small group here. If you want to, you can go ahead and unmute and tell us, or you could just type it into the chat, but tell us your name, what your major is, and what you're writing a personal statement for. If you're working on one right now or planning to in the near future, tell us what it's for. And then also, what is your biggest question or concern about writing a personal statement? So I'll give you a minute or two if you want to type into the chat. If anyone wants to share just by unmuting, please feel free to unmute and share as well. So.
I'm going to unmute because I'm currently driving home for the weekend.
So typing is not good. So go ahead. Yes, Sarah.
My name is Sarah. I'm in your internship class at the moment.
Yep.
I double major in political science and criminal justice. I'm looking to apply to start law school in the fall. So that is why I need to write a personal statement. And
Excellent.
I guess my biggest concern is just, or not really concern, but just writing a personal statement that's like authentic and isn't like something that they see every day. Like I want to stand out. Like I think that's my opportunity to stand out as an applicant. So just, yeah, I guess having it be authentic, stand out.
Excellent. And that is definitely one of the things we're going to talk about. So that's fabulous. Anyone else want to unmute and share? For those
my
who
name
are
is
just...
Mackenzie.
Oh, go ahead. Yep, go ahead, Mackenzie.
My name is Mackenzie. I'm a political science major, and I'm writing this personal statement for the New York State Senate and Assembly internship.
Excellent.
And my biggest concern is just writing one that's not like super generic or like one they see often. Like I just want to do something different to help me stand out.
Yeah, excellent. Excellent. We will definitely talk about that. Excellent. And Suri shared in the chat, political science major also for the Senate internship, struggling to draw the line between too much personality and drywall of detail. So yes, I think that's a great thing to talk about. So that's helpful. Anyone else want to share either in the chat or by unmuting to let us know what you're working on?
My name is Joel. I'm a criminal justice major and a sociology minor. I'm also trying to like stand out with my personal statement because I don't want it to be like depressing or like sad. I want to be like interesting and engaging.
Excellent. Excellent. And what are you working on one right now for? I think you're applying to the Senate or Assembly, right? Assembly. Excellent. Excellent. All right. And Lexi shared also political science major working on the Assembly application. Biggest concern is what the biggest don't do's are. So yes, we'll talk a little bit about what not to do as well. So excellent. Anyone else want to share before we dive in?
Hi, my name is Sadaf. I'm majoring in criminal justice and political science, and I'm also applying for the Assembly and Senate internship. And my biggest concern, well, I haven't really written a personal statement for any job before because none of them have required one. So I'm like new to this. So I'm just having to learn everything.
Excellent. Excellent. And Gabriel is I like to know how to write a personal statement. Biggest question is, what is a good formula for writing statements like these? So yes, we're going to talk a lot about all of those things. So great. Well, let's dive right in. And we'll be pretty informal. So feel free as we're going along, if you have questions, you can unmute or type them into the chat, use the raise your hand feature. I want to, be sure that I'm getting all the information that's helpful to you. So the first thing we're going to talk about, and actually before we even talk about this, I want to talk just a little bit about the difference between a personal statement and a cover letter. So typically a personal statement is, well, actually, let's start with a cover letter, because maybe you've written cover letters before. So typically a cover letter is a lot about your qualifications. You look at the job description, you look at the skills they're looking for, the job duties, and you talk about some experiences you've had, and you articulate your skills and accomplishments and experiences as they relate to that position. And you might talk a little bit at the beginning about why you're interested in that position or that organization, but the bulk of it is really focused on the skills and experiences. The flip side is, in a personal statement, you may put a little bit in about your skills and experiences and how that relates to the position, but the bulk of what you're talking about is really more about why you're interested in that position, why you're interested in that organization, how that fits with your career goals typically. And it is a more personal thing. So if you kind of think about it as like a seesaw, teeter-totter, on the cover letter is mostly your experience and a little bit of personal. The personal statement is the opposite, a little bit of experience and mostly your personal information. So questions about that, just in general, in terms of the difference between the two? All right, so let's talk about, before you start writing your personal statement, what do you want to do? And there's really three things that I think are important. The first is to read the instructions. So in general, there's a number of things that often are talked about in personal statements, but with each individual application, whether it's for a grad school or law school or an internship like the Assembly or Senate, or scholarship or fellowship program, there will often be some specific details, maybe sometimes some specific questions or some specific talking points that they may share, that basically says, this is, we're looking for this type of, topic, or these are the questions we want you to address in the personal statement. So that's the first thing you want to do, is see if there's any specific instructions for the personal statement you're writing, because the most important thing you want to do then is be sure you're answering those questions or talking on the points they want you to talk about. Then the second thing you want to do is you want to do a little self-reflection. So again, a personal statement is really about you. So you want to do a little self-reflection. So think about whatever those questions are or whatever the topics they've asked you to talk about, and spend some time thinking about it. And I would say even spend a couple of days. You might jot down some notes and then think about it a little bit more. But before you really start diving into writing, you want to spend some time thinking about. So for example, if they're asking, how does this, internship or fellowship or grad school fit into your future career goals, spend a little time thinking about, what are your future career goals and how does this fit in? So that way you've got some thoughts, and you can, like I said, jot down some notes as you're thinking about it. And that will help you to formulate. And I know someone mentioned you want to be sure that it's, personal, it's unique to you, and it's not like a generic one like all the rest that they see. That's the kind of things that are going to help you make it more personal to you, because you're going to think about, what is it really that you're hoping to get out of this internship or this experience or this grad school or whatever it is. So does that make sense? Questions about that? And then the last step before you start writing is to do some research. So you want to be sure, and in some cases you may have already done it, but if you haven't, you want to do some research on that organization. So if it's for an internship, you want to do some research about the internship program, the job duties, the organization that you're working for, so that you really fully understand what they do. If it's for grad school or law school, you want to do some research on that particular grad school or law school. What are the, specialty areas that that particular law school or grad school focuses in? What types of research do their faculty do? What types of law are they experts in? And that can really help you to connect your your passion with what the organization does, whether it's for a job or an internship or for grad school or something like that. So any questions about these kind of before you start steps? And again, for those who've arrived a little late, you can feel free to unmute yourself or use the raise your hand feature if you have questions, or type them into the chat. Any of those things will be fine. I'm keeping an eye on all of that. All right. So once you've done this kind of initial thinking and reflecting and research, then it's time to dive in and start writing. So let's talk about what to write and how to write your personal statement. And I've got a couple of slides, and we're going to just talk about each of these. And again, feel free to interrupt with questions for clarification or things like that. The first thing you want to do is think of a personal statement as telling a story. So you're going to really talk about you're telling a story about you, maybe some about your background experiences. You want to make it memorable. You don't want to bore them. So you don't want to just put a bunch of facts in or a bunch of, things that happen to you. You want to really use those good writing skills, because a personal statement is also a writing sample, and they're, using it to get to know you, but also it's a way for them to kind of assess your writing skills. So it's not quite as formal as a cover letter, and it's a little more less businessy. It's a little more personal. So you really want, if you think of it as telling a story, that will help with the flow and the structure of it. That will make it seem more personable. So questions about that, about the telling a story? And you may, start with, kind of how did you get interested? And we'll talk more about how to start it in a little bit. But like, if you think about the story, you may talk about, since many of you are applying to the Senate and Assembly internships, you may think about, like, what is it that got you interested in politics to begin with, or an interest in the legislative process? Was it something that happened in your childhood? Was it something that your family experienced? Was it something that maybe you did some volunteer work, either in college or high school, that really got you interested in a certain policy area? Maybe it was something you studied in a class, a book you read, news, like a world event that happened that really kind of sparked your interest in this. Think about that and use that as a starting point to then tell the story. And then what did you do? Is that how you chose your major? Or maybe you got involved, or you volunteered, or you took some classes, more classes related to that. You're going to tell that story. Maybe you got some experience, again, volunteered or did an internship related to that. You're going to kind of tell that story. And then where is that taking you in the future? Like, how does this internship or this grad school or whatever fit in with that? And what do you want to do in the future? So again, it's that story arc about you and your life, as it relates to mostly usually your career or whatever it is that you're applying to. Make sense? Questions? All right. So the second thing you want to be sure that you do is use specific examples. So again, if you say things like, I just want to help people, or my experience working with homeless people made me appreciate the need for more governmental assistance for people. Okay, that's great, but give me some specific examples. Like, did you volunteer at a homeless shelter or a soup kitchen? Did you do a research paper where you studied the statistics around the percentage of homelessness in different states? Like, that's what you want to do. You want to back up the statements, the assertions that you make with some specific examples, and that's what's going to make it seem more personal to you and less generic that anyone could have written it. Make sense? Questions? Kind of building on that, you want to find an angle. You want to be unique. So again, you want to stand out from all of the other personal statements they're reading and all of the other applicants. And you want that hook. And I was talking about, like, kind of what was it that got you interested in this? And just like any good story, you want to hook them in from the very beginning. And you want to then, use that to show how you're different from other candidates. So again, it might be because of a personal experience. Maybe you have an interest in healthcare policy, and it's because your grandmother, had diabetes and she struggled with that all of her life. And you remember going to see her and seeing how, she had, she lost her eyesight as she got older and she wasn't able to care for herself. And and that really helped you. And maybe because of her finances, she couldn't get additional help. And so maybe like your family had to go and help her a lot, or maybe she had to move in with you because there just wasn't the resources. And so that got you interested in healthcare policy and what we could be doing to help people with particular, illnesses. That's the hook. What is it that's unique to you? And then you're going to kind of use that to build your whole personal statement on. Make sense? Questions? All right, I'm not hearing anything, so hopefully it's making sense. But feel free to, like I said, unmute, ask questions, type in the chat if you've got any questions. And then similarly, I was kind of alluding to this, you really want to focus on that opening paragraph. So you want to, it's really the most important part of the personal statement. You want to grab their attention, because in that first paragraph, if you think about it from the perspective of the person reading dozens or hundreds of personal statements, the review committee, the internship coordinator, the graduate school admissions board, whoever it is, think about them reading dozens or hundreds of personal statements. And if you don't get their attention in that first paragraph, you kind of lose their attention and they kind of skim through the rest of it and don't really read it. You want to have that hook. You want to grab their attention in that first paragraph and really get them interested in hearing more about your story. And then that becomes the framework for the rest of your statement. Make sense? Questions? Okay. So somebody mentioned this when we were talking about what you were concerned about or what your questions were about being authentic. And I think that is so important in a personal statement, because people can smell a phony. They can recognize exaggeration, insincerity. If they think you're just saying things that, you think the committee wants to hear and not really focusing on the personal. And that's why the things that I mentioned on the other page, that, having that hook, connecting it to a personal experience, those are the things that's going to make it more authentic. And then as you use that for kind of your structure for the paper, and then you talk about why you chose this major because of whatever happened or whatever experience you had, and why you're interested in this particular career going forward, and how this internship or this graduate program or law school or whatever fits in with your career goals. All of that stems from the story and ties in to make the story about what you're hoping to do, why you want to do this. And the why becomes very important, like why you got into this, why you really want to, pursue this opportunity, whatever it is. Questions? Make sense? Okay. So let's talk about the next one. Address potential shortcomings. So maybe your GPA isn't quite as good as you'd like it to be. Maybe it's kind of borderline or just below what their cutoff is. Maybe you don't have quite as much experience as you would have liked to have had, or maybe that you think other applicants have. This is an opportunity in the personal statement to provide some context for those shortcomings. So if it's a GPA issue, you might, address the fact that you started out as a biology major and realized that wasn't really your jam. And again, you wouldn't say jam in a personal statement, but it wasn't really for you. And then you explored other majors and you found, political science or criminal justice or whatever it is that you're majoring in now. And once you were taking those classes, you were more engaged in them and it really improved your GPA. Or maybe you had one semester where there was, you yourself had some health issues, or you had a family member with some health issues. Again, you're giving some context for this. You don't want to dwell on it. You don't want to make excuses. You want to be pretty upbeat about it, but you want to focus on the perseverance. Like, you got over this challenge and now you're doing this, or how you've improved or what you've learned from that experience. So again, it's not going to be a big focus of the personal statement, but just a couple of sentences kind of woven in to address any potential shortcomings can be a really nice way to, address that and provide the context, talk about what you've learned from that or how you've overcome that. And honestly, most everybody has some things. Not everyone's perfect in every way. So seeing what you've learned from that really can help whoever's reviewing it, the employer or the grad school or law school, seeing that perseverance or learning from your mistakes or learning from a bad experience really actually shows more about your character and probably something that they would be looking for. So questions about that? Because I know that's always a tough one to kind of how to address those things. All right. So let's talk about what not to include. So there's some subjects you want to avoid, and obviously things that are really controversial. Now, that being said, in the world of politics, sometimes if you're applying to those types of things, some things that are controversial, like that's part of the game. And so in that case, you would, having a discussion about, a political issue or something like that, as long as it's done in a civil way and a constructive way, that's perfectly fine in that setting. But you do want to avoid, really extreme opinions, unless you're applying to a fellowship or a scholarship with an organization that is if what you're saying is in line with the organization, then that's perfectly appropriate. But like, for example, a law school or a graduate school are usually a little more middle of the road. Same thing with like the legislative internships, because there's people on all sides of the political spectrum there. So you want to avoid those really controversial subjects, really extreme opinions. That's probably going to set you apart in a way that's not productive for what you want to get out of this. Does that make sense? One thing I will say, when you're thinking about giving examples and stuff like that, you do, obviously more recent examples and things like that can be more helpful. But because unlike a cover letter in a personal statement, you're telling the story, you may have some examples and some experiences from your childhood or from high school or junior high or elementary school that are relevant to your story. So that's perfectly fine to include those types of things if they fit in line with the story of what you're getting at. Make sense? Questions? And then the last thing in terms of kind of the what and how to write, you want to be sure that you connect to the program you're applying for. So again, whether it's an internship, a scholarship, a grad school, law school, whatever it is, you want to show why you're a good fit. Show that you've done your homework. We talked about that research at the beginning. Show that you've done your homework and talk about how, your story, your experience, your interests, your career goals fit in with whatever that program or organization is. So any questions in general about the kind of what to include and how to write a personal statement? Was this helpful? Feel free to unmute and let me know what things jumped out at you. What did you think was the most helpful of those tips, or what additional questions do you have? I've been talking for a while. It's always good for someone else to talk for a minute, so feel free. Anyone want to share? You can type in the chat too if you prefer to share that way.
How long are personal statements typically?
So that's a great question. Typically 1 to 2 pages if they don't give you any guidelines. So often they will give you some guidelines. And so if they do, obviously you're going to follow the guidelines, but if they don't, then typically 1 to 2 pages. And again, the format usually for personal statements, less specific, unless they give you some specifics about how to format it. you can do single space, you can do double space. It's usually kind of essay style, paragraph style, but the specific formatting is usually not that important unless they tell you how they want it formatted. And I would say, you know, like 1 to 2 pages, but I would say that less is more in most cases. I think that's on my next slide. So, you know, 2 full single space lines might be a little too much, if that makes sense. So it's in the 1 to 2 pages range, but
Thank you.
more concise is sometimes better. Other questions, comments, thoughts about what we've talked about so far? Okay, so I'm going to go on to some other tips, just in general about writing personal statements. So, and I think I mentioned this early on too, you really want to showcase your best writing. This is in fact another writing sample. They may have you submit other writing examples, but they want to see your writing skills. And so you want to showcase your best writing. And to that effect, you want to draft it, then you want to edit it, you want to repeat, you want to go through several editing processes. A personal statement or something like that is not something you do, you know, at the last minute, you know, just before the deadline. You really probably want to be working on this at least a week, if not 2 weeks before the deadline. So kudos to you who are applying to the Senate and Assembly. That deadline is about 2 weeks away. So you are on target here. But you want to really have a chance to, you know, reread it, put it away for a day, come back to it again, read it again, and really go through several drafts. The other thing you want to do is you want to get feedback from outside sources. So have other people read it. And that can be, you know, like career staff, advisors, faculty members, friends, parents, you know, have several different people read it coming from different perspectives, because you're going to get different, you know, different thoughts. They're going to notice different things, and it really can provide you with the, you know, additional feedback that is helpful to continuing to kind of perfect it and make it as good as possible. So questions about that piece of it? All right, so the next thing is getting rid of the fluff, which kind of goes back to your question about how long. So again, I said 1 to 2 pages. There are some where it will be as short as, you know, 500 to 1,000 words. So you may get a word count for sometimes, and it could be pretty short. Either way, you want to get rid of the fluff. So what I mean by that is you're telling a story, so you want to, you know, have it flow through the story, but sometimes we can get off on tangents when we're telling a story. And so as you're going back and proofing it and editing it, you want to think about each of the paragraphs or each of the sentences. Does this continue to contribute to the main point of the story, or is this an unnecessary tangent? Sometimes people give too much backstory. And again, with this type of thing, you want to get that hook, but you don't need to spend 3 paragraphs talking about why, you know, you got started interested in this. Like that is, you know, a couple of sentences, and then you go on to what you did with that and what you've done since then and what you've learned from that and why that has, you know, made you passionate about whatever it is that you're passionate about. So you want to be sure to get rid of the fluff and really focus on creating that clear, concise message that flows with your story. Make sense? Questions? Okay, the next thing you want to do is avoid cliches. And I think, you know, a couple of you mentioned you don't want it to sound like everybody else's. So I think, you know, saying that, you know, you're good at research and you want to help people. Like, okay, pretty much anything that in this field, anything you're applying to, grad school, law school, internships, that's great. Good at research, want to help people. Fabulous. Presumably everybody who's applying is good at research and wants to help people. So you really want to avoid those kind of cliche lines like I want to help people, and instead focus more on what do you mean by that? Like, how do you want to help people? Do you want to focus on, you know, more fair sentencing practices in the criminal justice system, like, or are you interested in better policies to assist single parents with, children and economic struggles in terms of getting healthy food for their children? Like, that's what I mean by avoid the cliche lines and really get to something more meaningful and more specific to what you're interested in. Make sense? You also want to write in your own voice. So I think, that's one thing where seeing another personal statement doesn't necessarily help you, because you want to be sure you're writing in your own voice. And that's what goes back to that being authentic. It's like you're telling the story. Obviously, you want it to sound polished and professional, not like really informal, like as if you were telling your story, but you want it to have that flow that is words and language that you typically use. Don't make it sound so academic or so professional that it loses your voice. You want to sound like it's you. And that's where having people who know you well, faculty members well, your advisor, family members, friends that know you well, they can give you some feedback on that. Does it sound like I'm writing this, or does it sound like somebody else wrote this? That's a good way. That's kind of a good test as to whether you're being authentic or not. Is that helpful? The next thing you want to do is keep it simple. Again, it kind of goes in the same way. You don't need super fancy language. You don't need long, complex sentence structure. You're telling a story. You want those shorter, more concise, straightforward sentences that you want to paint a picture so that, use some adjectives and some adverbs and paint a nice picture, but you want to be sure that you're writing in a straightforward style that really, is easy to read and flows nicely as you're telling that story. Questions? All right. You also want to use active voice. And this is something I talk about a lot with cover letters as well. Some of you may have, had faculty members who talk about this in class in terms of particularly around, kind of policy memos and those types of things. There's much more emphasis on active voice. Active voice, the biggest difference is that you're the subject and you're doing something or you did something, as opposed to something's happening to you. So a little grammar lesson. So if you were to say, I believe this, I experienced this, I completed this, I researched this, whatever, that's active voice. You're the subject and you're talking about something you did. Passive voice is when things happen to you. So saying things like, as a result of this, this caused me to, this helped me to, the thing becomes the subject and it's happening to you. And the biggest reason, there's really two reasons why. It's just, it's a less straightforward way of writing. It's a less engaging way of writing. So it makes your whole personal statement seem a little more, dull is not really the right word, but academic, less engaging. Whereas if you're active voice, it's more engaging, you're the subject, it's talking about you. It also shows you as the person who's in control of your life. You're not just sitting around letting things happen. Now, that being said, it might have been something that happened to you that was the impetus and the beginning hook in your story, but the rest of it shouldn't be about you sitting around waiting for things to happen. It should be about what you did as a result of that. I decided to study this. I, got involved and volunteered. I, whatever, wrote my congressperson. So it's the active voice. It's showing what you did. You're the star of your story. Does that make sense? All right. You also want to have a positive tone. You want to be positive, enthusiastic, energetic. I mean, some of the things you're talking about might be things that aren't that positive. Maybe something tragic happened and that's what was, you know, the impetus. Or maybe you were on this path and then something, you know, happened to kind of be a big stumbling block for you. And you want to talk about how you overcame it. So not everything's going to be sunny, perfect, but the overall tone of the paper should be a positive tone. So, you know, even if you're talking about something sad or tragic as part of it, you don't want that to be the primary focus. Don't dwell on that for too long. You wanted this happened, this was the tragic thing, and this is the positive outcome from that. And you want to focus on why you're engaged, how this motivated you, how this energized you, why this is your life's passion, and really get to that positive, passionate piece of it as the overall theme and not theme, but the overall tone of the paper. Make sense? Questions? And then one more time, I'll just mention to be sure to follow the length guidelines. So if they give you specific page lengths or word counts in the instructions, I'll go back to the specific questions they asked. After you've been writing it in part of your editing stage, go back and read the initial questions or the journal prompts that they gave you for the personal statement. And you want to be sure that you're following those guidelines, answering those questions, really addressing what they want you to address. So questions about any of these other tips? All right, or anything related to personal statements, either things you mentioned at the beginning or other questions that have come up that I haven't addressed, because I want to be sure to answer all of your questions before we wrap up. And again, you can unmute or type in the chat, whatever, if you have any questions. Excellent. All right. So, and welcome to the person who just arrived. We are just wrapping up, but we have recorded it, so we will share the recording as well. But I do want to let you know that for additional help, a couple of things that I think you'll find helpful. The job and internship search handbook. Some of you may have this. We will send this in the follow-up email. It's got all kinds of things about job and internship searches, but one of the things in there is a couple of pages specifically about personal statements. And a lot of the tips that I talked about in this workshop today are also reiterated there. So that will be a great resource for you as you're working on personal statements, either now or in the future. So definitely take advantage of that handbook. And then our Rockefeller College Career Office. I think most of you sounded like you were Rockefeller students, political science, public policy, criminal justice. So obviously you can access our Rockefeller College Career Office. We have a downtown and an uptown location. There's our contact information in our website. You can schedule an appointment through Handshake with either Christina Cardona, Ashley Dwyer, who are my colleagues, or myself. Or stop by our office hours. So when you're working on a personal statement, or if you have questions about anything career related or internship related, those are our drop-in office hours for those times listed there. You do not need an appointment. You can just stop by either our Zoom link or in person where our location is listed there. Or if those times don't work, you can always schedule an appointment through Handshake. And we do both in-person and Zoom appointments, all three of us. So we're all available to help with things like personal statements or any other thing like that. If you happen to be watching this and you're not a Rockefeller College major, you can also access the main career office, or if your department has their own career staff, any of those people can be helpful. And I would say for personal statements in particular, just college faculty are also pretty good at providing assistance for personal statements. And I do see Gabriel added a question in the chat, so let me get back to that before we end. Should we avoid relevant jargon or use it to showcase experience and research? So I think that's a really good question, Gabriel. I think that things that are jargon that are related to the field, it's definitely fine to include that. Again, not in a way that's just all jargon and sounding cliche, but in a way that shows that you've done your research and you're familiar with the field and how this fits in with your story. I think that's definitely a good thing to include. So, great. Any other questions? And we're happy to, whether it's for the Senate Assembly application now or as you're applying to grad schools and law schools, you can schedule an appointment with us as you're starting working on your personal statement. If you're struggling, to just kind of have a brainstorming chat about how to get started. Or if you've got a draft written and you'd like one of us to look at it and give you some feedback, we are definitely happy to help with that at any stage in that process. So.